there, my name is Hido and welcome to the Pantheon, where it's Innistrad and there's horrifying things everywhere like a balding man with a beard. I'm not just talking about myself. No, this is Donal, Herald of Wings. 4 mana for a 3/3 human wizard, and look at him surrounded by all those lovely birdies. Whenever you cast a non-legendary creature spell with flying, you may copy it, except the copy is a 1/1 spirit in addition to its other types. Do this only once each turn. So it was sounding fantastic, wasn't it? Until you get that clause at the end. You know, the once each turn. Oh, it's annoying, but it allows you to build in, or it makes you build in a slightly different way. You know, think about things. Maybe we won't flash, things like that. So, you know, it is a big downside, but there's some cool ways that we can build around this and play into that. And doubling up all your flyers, well, there's a lot of cool enter the battlefield effects on flyers, so that's pretty good. Why is it non-legendary? I don't really know. There's some really nice legendaries I'd like to copy, but oh well, one of them would die instantly, I guess. But then the spirit, maybe it vanquishes the spirit. Who really knows? What I know is you should subscribe to my channel. Please subscribe. I'm going to be making videos like this for every single legendary creature. And Donald Duck is one of the few that we're going to be doing right now. Oh, it's sort of fitting, actually. Donald Duck. He's a duck. He makes birds. You know, I don't know. Anyway, let's move on and look at my top 5. So in at number 5, we've got things that care about creatures with flying, because we're going to be playing a lot of them. We're going to be making copies of all of them. So let's take advantage of that. Gravitational Shift, a card I've always loved. I love the artwork on this. 5 mana for an enchantment. Creatures with flying get +2 per soul. Creatures without flying get -2 mana soul. So absolutely fantastic. Yes, it makes our commander into a 1/3. Not that big of an issue when everything else in our deck is going to be flying and flapping above him. So a really great card. Love the flavour. Makes every one of our tokens into a 3/1. So, you know, it's a nice aggressive threat. Can take down some planeswalkers, things like that. Or potentially an opponent's face. So a great card for the deck. Similarly, there's favourable wins, 2 mana for an enchantment. Creatures you control with flying get +1/+1. Absolutely simple, absolutely wonderful. Just a great buff all around. And the majority of our deck is going to be flyers because we want to make as much of advantage, as big an advantage out of our commander as we can. Similarly, there's Winged Words. 3 mana for a sorcery. The spell costs 1 less to cast if you control a creature with flying. Draw 2 cards. So 2 mana, draw 2 cards. That's pretty good. I've played that in a fair few black decks, admittedly. Blue's got better draw than that, but it's on theme. It says winged in it, you know, whoo. And words, I'm sure this man reads. So, excellent card. And finally, Warden of Evos Isles, which is incredible in this deck. 3 mana, 2/2 with flying. Creature spells with flying you cast cost 1 less to cast. So the awesome thing is, when we cast this, well, we get a copy of it. So all of our flying creatures are going to cast 2 less, which is just phenomenal for 3 mana. This card is insane in the deck and will just power out ridiculous things. And we've got some ridiculous things that we want to cast. And then at number 4, here's some of them. And these are all about card advantage. Muldrifter being the prime example. 5 mana for a 2/2 flyer. When it enters the battlefield, draw 2 cards. But you can evoke it. So our commander cares about us casting the cards. And evoke is casting it. So for 3 mana, it comes into play. You sacrifice it straight away. It goes to the graveyard, but you still get the enter the battlefield effect. So our token will come in. We'll draw 4 cards for 3 mana. That's pretty goddamn good value. Muldrifter, phenomenal card. Always loved it. And, you know, who doesn't love a fish that's bursting into insects? Who really knows what's going on? But this is all about card advantage here. Cloudkin Seer, 3 mana for a 2/1 flyer. When it's the battlefield, draw a card. So you're going to be drawing 2 cards. 3 mana, 2 cards. It's divination, but it's got 3/2 in stats attached to it. So yeah, I'd play that. That's pretty good. Then Raven Familiar. This artwork is one of my favourite. I just love how chunky this Raven looks. It's just sat there and it's looking at you. What are you going to do about it? I love it. 3 mana for a bird with flying and echo for 3. So when it comes in, the upkeep, after it entered the battlefield, you have to pay its echo cost or you sacrifice it. I've memorized that. 1/2, And when it enters the battlefield, look at the top 3 cards of your library, put one of them into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. So that happens twice, which is pretty goddamn good. Yes, you have to pay the echo on both the token and this, but who cares? Just put them into your graveyard. You're digging 6 deep for 3 mana. Incredible. And if you have Warden of Evil Siles out and it's token copy, this is 1 blue mana to draw 2, look at 6. Amazing. So good. And then Sky Scanner, a card that I never thought I'd really see much Commander play, and it doesn't. But it should in this deck, because for 3 mana, it's a 1/1 with flying. When it's the battlefield, draw a card. So that's 3 mana, 2 1/1s with flying, draw 2 cards. Ooh, now that is some value. Now, here are a couple of ways to interact and sort of have a bit of fun. Miss Raven, 4 mana, 2/2 with flying. When it's the battlefield, return target creature to its owner's hand. So 4 mana, we get to bounce 2 creatures with this. And then if we flicker it back to our hand, not flicker, sorry, return it back to our hand or something like that, we can reuse it because remember, our commander cares about us casting the spells. Then there's Eldrazi Sky Spawner. 3 mana for a 2/1 with flying. When it enters the battlefield, put a 1/1 colored Eldrazi science creature token on the battlefield that has sacrifice creature. Add a colors to the mana pool. So this is awesome because we're getting 2 of those tokens, but that means that we're ramping for 2 mana here for 3 mana investment. So we can go from turn 3, play this, turn 4, we play a land, sacrifice the 2 things. We've got a 6 drop or something like that. You know, it just curves out wonderfully. And this is a great, cool bit of interaction with the commander. You know, it's ramp that fits into the main game plan, and that's what I'm all about. Then there's Cloud of Fairies, very similar. 2 mana for a 1/1 with flying. When it enters the battlefield, untap up to 2 lands. So when this enters, we're going to play 2 mana to untap 4 lands altogether. And there's a whole swath of these that have Flying Palinchron included. So you can use them. But this one's the best because look at the bottom of that text box. It's cycling, best mechanic ever printed. 2 mana, cycle it, so discard it, draw a card. If this isn't good for you right now, you know, it probably is. You can always get rid of it to get deeper into the deck and probably draw a land. And that brings me on to number 3. And at number 3, we've got Scion of Una and Cloud of Fairies, shockingly, very disturbingly actually, is indeed a fairy. So I'd go down a sort of fairy tribal route with this deck. 3 mana, 1/1 fairy soldier. It's got flash and flying. Other fairy creatures you control get the +1/+1. Other fairies you control have shroud. Amazing protection, amazing buff. And if we're making a token copy of this, it buffs each other. So each other are going to have shroud. The token will have shroud, and then this will have shroud, and then they'll each give each other +1/+1, which is just wonderful. And I talked about the once each turn. This has flash, so we can do this on an opponent's turn. And that, you know, spoilers for later in the video, that might be coming up because we've got to be playing on our opponent's turn. And fairies are a fantastic way to do them. A lot of them have flash. So this card is insane. Spell Stutter Sprite goes fantastically with it as well. 2 mana for a wizard fairy with flash and flying. When it's the battlefield, counter target spell with converted mana cost X or less, where X is the number of fairies you control. So the cool thing about this commander is when it makes the token copy, yes, it's a spirit, but in addition to its other types, so it's still a fairy. So the token will count towards the Spell Stutter Sprites, into the battlefield effect, which is just fantastic. It works amazingly with all these other fairies that we're talking about. Then Quickling, 2 mana for a 2/2 with flash and flying. When it enters the battlefield, sacrifice it unless you return another creature you control to its owner's hand. So I talked earlier about the fact that our commander cares about casting the spells. Well, this gets something back into your hand. Flickering would be pretty good, but sadly we're not going to make a token. So getting it back to our hand, we can recast it. And it has flash, so we're going to be making a copy so we can bounce 2 things. This can just be excellent board wipe insurance for your best pieces. Really great card. Then there's Fairy Harbinger, 4 mana 2/2 flash flying fairy wizard. When it comes into play, you may search your library for a fairy card, reveal it, shuffle your library and put that card on top of it. Now, there is something to be said about this because it's sort of not that good because the token enters, you search your library, put something on top. Then the regular copy enters, you go and search your library, you shuffle that card away. But if you have instant speed ways to draw cards, this can be fantastic because you can get the token copy, you search your library, draw a card, then search again, get another fairy on top. So there are good ways to manipulate this with our commander. Then if we're playing fairies, let's have a Notorious Throng. 4 mana for a tribal sorcery rogue. Prowl for 6 mana. You may cast this prowl for its prowl cost if you dealt damage to a player this turn with a rogue. So a lot of the fairies are rogues. The ones I've talked about here particularly aren't, but you could go into the rogue sort of archetype. Create X/1/1 black fairy creature tokens with flying, where X is the damage dealt to your opponents this turn. If the spell's prowl cost was paid, take an extra turn after this one. So even if you're not going to be prowling it and getting that extra turn, you can create a ton of flyers, little tokens that are knocking around and gumming up the board and swinging for lots of damage. Then we've got a Sprite Noble, which is a fairy for 3 mana, and it's a 2/2. It's got flying, so we can make a copy of it. Ooh. And then other creatures you control with flying get +0/+1. Then you can tap it. Other creatures you control with flying get +1/+0 until end of turn. So we're going to have 2 copies of this, so we could potentially give all our flyers +2/+0. Not that exciting, but it's still quite cool in the deck. And it's a card that you wouldn't particularly put in a different style of deck, so I love it. Glenalendra, however, is a card I'd put in, well, every single deck. 4 mana for a fairy wizard with flying. Pay blue, sacrifice it, counter target non-creature spell. Persist, so it comes back with a -1/-1 counter on it. So our token, despite the fact, well, it's a token, you can still sacrifice it, but it just won't come back with persist. So that's 3 counter spells for 1 card with our commander on the field, which is just love it. Which brings me on to my number 2 pick. And at number 2, we've got another fairy, but this section is all about stealing from your opponent, because a lot of flyers love to do that. Sword of Temptation, 4 mana for a fairy wizard with flying, a 2/2. When it enters the battlefield, gain control of target creature for as long as Sword of Temptation remains on the battlefield. So our token will have that trigger and we'll steal 2 of the best creatures. 2 commanders, yes, they get it back if they kill our creatures, but that is just a fantastic steal effect. And it fits not only into the fairy archetype, but the flying one that we're building as well. Similarly, there's... Well, I can't afford this card, but you can easily just print it out on a piece of paper and play it with your friends. Who cares? This is Commander. Gilded Drake, 2 mana for a 3/3 with flying. When it comes into play, exchange control of Gilded Drake for a target creature one of your opponent's controls, or sacrifice Gilded Drake. Buyer beware. Look at that text at the bottom is just, whoa, it's amazing. So this is great because we get a copy of it. That's a token. We give them the token. It's a 1/1. We bounce it or whatever we want. We get their best creature. So for 2 mana, you're getting 2 of the best creatures on the field. They get some rubbish flyers. I like flyers, but not quite as good as an Ulmog, is it? Fairy Artisans is a different take on this. 4 mana for a 2/2 flyer. Whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield under an opponent's control, create a token that's a copy of the creature, except it's an artifact in addition to its other types. Then exile all of the tokens created with Fairy Artisans. So we're going to have a token copy of Fairy Artisans, which will also make a token copy of anything that comes in. So we get 2 token copies of everything, which is really, really nice value. Then there's Royal Elemental, a big 6 mana 3/2. Ooh. It's got flying, of course, and whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may gain control of target creature for as long as you control Royal Elemental. So we'll have 2 Royal Elementals, and we can just steal all of the things. So let's steal some spells as well. Chancellor of the Spires, 7 mana for a 5/7 with flying. You can reveal this card from your opening hand. If you do, everyone mills 7, except for us. And then when it enters the battlefield, you cast a target instant or sorcery card from that opponent's graveyard without paying its mana cost. And the fantastic thing about that is when we cast it from the graveyard, it doesn't have the Goes to Exile clause like Flashback usually does or Diluvian Primordial does. So the token comes in, we cast, I don't know, Blasphemous Act. Terrible card to cast. But what happens is you can play it with the token cast it. Then the regular one enters, you can cast the exact same spell. Demonic Tutor is a better example, I think. I don't know why Blasphemous Act was the first choice. But that's what you can do. You can get 2 copies of whatever instant sorcery spell is knocking about. Then there's Diluvian Primordial, 7 mana 5/5 flyer. When it enters the battlefield for each opponent, you may cast up to 1 target instant sorcery card from that player's graveyard without paying its mana cost. If the spell cast this way will be put into a graveyard this turn, exile it instead. So that's just so much value. Potentially with the token. It's 6 spells that you're getting for just 7 mana. It's just so good. So powerful. It's a really swingy, game-winning effect. And, you know, in blue, we should be running a lot of counter spells. So someone goes to win with a Doomsday or something like that. We counter it, and then we get to cast it. Lovely. Then this isn't stealing from our opponents. This is stealing from ourselves on an emotional level. Scholar of the Lost Trove, 7 mana for a 5/5 flyer. When it enters the battlefield, you may cast target instant, sorcery, or artifact card from your graveyard without paying its mana cost. If an instant or sorcery spell cast this way we put into graveyard this turn, exile it instead. So we get 2 of whatever we want. And we're going to have some good things in our deck because, you know, we're building it together, aren't we? So obviously everything's going to be wonderful. And that brings me on to my number 1 selection. And I hinted at it earlier. Well, our commander has a downside, you know, the once each turn. Let's cast things on our opponent's turn. Let's give everything flash with Teferi, Mage of Zalfir. 5 mana for a 3/4 flash human wizard. It's not got flying, and it is legendary, so we're not getting any token copies of it. However, creature cards you own that aren't on the battlefield have flash. Each opponent you can cast spells only any time they could cast a sorcery. So we've got all the flash. They've got none of the flash. They're not glittering. They're just, you know, they're playing kitchen table magic at this point. You know, I'll catch my great whale. Who cares? You're dead. Anyway, we can just cast anything we want whenever we want, which is so good. And similarly, we've got Leyline of Anticipation. 4 mana for an enchantment. If it is in your opening hand, you may begin the game with it on the battlefield. You may cast spells as though they had flash. So these sort of effects just accelerate our deck so much, allow us to really play ahead of our opponents, and we will be getting so many token copies of all of our flyers, even if they don't have flash. Although we can just play things with flash, like Dream Eater. 6 mana for a Nightmare Sphinx. Ooh. It's got flying, so obviously we get a copy. 4/3, and when it enters the battlefield, Surveil 4. Then, when you do, you may return target non-land permanent an opponent controls to its owner's hand. So, Surveil 4, basically we look at the top 4, put them back in any order, or put them into the graveyard. And then we get to bounce 2 permanents. So we get to Surveil 4 and then 4, so it's sort of 8. And then we get to bounce 2 things. Amazing, and because it's got flash, we can do it on our opponent's turn. Then we got Vidalcan Orrery, the artifact version of the Leyline. 4 mana for an artifact. You may cast non-land cards as though they had flash. Simple. Nothing to say, nothing to see. And here are a couple of cool cards with flash that have flying. Blizzard Strix is a 5 mana bird. It's a snow creature with flying. When it enters the battlefield, if you control another snow permanent, exile target permanent other than Blizzard Strix. Return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. So the thing about this deck is we're playing a lot of enter the battlefield effects. So making use of them with our commander, obviously we want to cast things, but sometimes you just want to generate a bit of value. So we can just flicker something with a card like this. And the awesome thing is, snow permanent, well, we can just play snow basic lands. So we're always going to hit that requirement. And because it's got flying and flash, we can get 2 copies of it, flicker 2 things. So much value. Then the subtlety, something I lack. 4 mana for a 3/3 with flash and flying. When it's the battlefield, choose up to 1 target creature spell or planeswalker spell. Its owner puts it on the top or bottom of their library. And you can evoke this by exiling a blue card from your hand. And we're playing mono blue. We've got plenty of cards knocking around, so this is potentially a free counter spell. Really nice, and just a great card to get a copy of. You can put 2 spells on the top or bottom. Ooh. But it's just 2 flying blockers and attackers. Then Pestamite. A nice little fairy I thought I'd throw in here. I love the artwork. I love the big giant in the background with this horrible sort of nose and its big eyebrows. It looks amazing. 3 mana for a 2/1 with flash and flying. When it enters the battlefield, you may tap or untap target permanent. So that can really mess with your opponent's game plan. And you can tap or untap 2 permanents because you're getting a token copy. And those are my top 5 picks for Dolan. Is that his name? I can't remember what his name is. But he's a really cool commander. And building around flying, you know, if you've ever played Limited, blue-white flyers is always a fantastic archetype. So let's just make blue flyers in Commander. Ooh, great. And we're getting token copies of all of them. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please do like, comment, subscribe. Tell me your favourite flying creature. Mine's a Sphinx, if you can guess what it is. Bit cryptic, like Sphinx. Anyway, I'll see you soon. Bye.